The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, was a devastating blow, but as the United States mobilized for war, military leaders soon realized that their greatest weakness lay not in a shortage of men or material, but in a profound strategic failure of communication. The war that erupted in the Pacific was a conflict defined by vast distances, isolated island chains, and fierce, unseen enemies. But the Japanese enemy was not unseen by their intelligence officers. They were reading American radio traffic with chilling efficiency. The initial losses suffered by U.S. forces in the Philippines, Wake Island, and Guam were compounded by the enemy's almost prescient knowledge of American troop movements. Every encrypted message sent by the U.S. military, whether by standard codes or complex early cipher machines, was being intercepted, cracked, and translated. Commanders were fighting with their hands tied. Every order, every tactical deployment, was instantly compromised. The Japanese had successfully penetrated the very nerve center of American command. This intelligence disaster created a climate of paranoia and paralyzing slowness within the communication ranks. The sophisticated coding machines available at the time were heavy, unreliable in the humid, saltwater environment of the Pacific, and agonizingly slow. To encode a short, critical 3-line order could easily take a trained operator up to 30 minutes. By the time the message reached the front lines, the situation it described had often changed, and the information was already useless or worse, dangerously misleading. The military urgently needed a cipher that was not only secure but also fast enough to keep pace with the brutal tempo of island warfare. The search for this unbreakable code became a matter of national strategic survival. Analysts considered every option, including reviving obscure, dead languages or creating new, complex mathematical ciphers. All avenues proved flawed, either too slow to use in combat or ultimately vulnerable to the highly skilled codebreakers employed by the Japanese Empire. It was into this deep strategic vacuum that a singular, unorthodox solution emerged, proposed by a civilian who was not a cryptographer, but a man of unique cultural experience, Philip Johnston. Johnston, the son of a missionary, had been raised near the remote Navajo reservation and was one of the very few non-Navajo individuals who spoke Dine Bizad, the Navajo language, fluently. He understood its inherent strategic value. He realized that the language's total isolation from European and Asian linguistic families made it an accidental fortress, a linguistic wall that neither the Japanese nor their German allies had any academic or historical frame of reference to breach. It had no alphabet, no technical dictionary, and its complex tonal and grammatical structure defied all standard forms of linguistic analysis. In early 1942, Johnston presented his radical idea to high-ranking officials in the Marine Corps. His proposal was met with profound skepticism. Officers could not fathom replacing million-dollar machines with a native language. To prove his point, Johnston organized a demonstration. He brought 4 young Navajo men to a restricted Marine base and had them quickly and flawlessly transmit complex military messages back and forth. The test was so successful, so instantaneous, and so utterly baffling to the attending officers, that they immediately authorized the recruitment of the first group. The Marine Corps authorized the recruitment of 29 young Navajo men, the pioneers who would later be known as the Original 29. These men, hailing from the vast, silent deserts of the American Southwest, carried with them the unique burden of history. They were members of a community that had suffered decades of systematic oppression and forced assimilation by the U.S. government, a government that had often physically punished them for speaking the very language it now desperately needed to win a world war. Their decision to volunteer, their profound patriotism in the face of deep-seated injustice, highlights the moral complexity and ultimate commitment that would define their service. They were tasked not just with using their language, but with transforming it into the ultimate military encryption tool. Their training began immediately, marking the start of a top-secret mission that would fundamentally change the course of the Pacific Campaign. The Marine Corps had found its perfect, uncrackable code, hidden in plain sight, deep within the heart of the American landscape. The first task for the original 29 recruits was to enter strict isolation at Camp Pendleton, California, and begin the intensive, creative process of building a comprehensive military lexicon. The Navajo language was highly descriptive and deeply connected to the natural world, but it lacked any vocabulary for the tools of modern industrial warfare. There was no word for tank, submarine, grenade, or artillery. The code talkers were given the unprecedented task of inventing them. They approached this challenge with brilliant ingenuity, creating a metaphorical substitution code. This process involved finding terms rooted in their culture and environment that accurately and cleverly represented military equipment. For example, a bomber was encoded as Jaysho, the Navajo word for buzzard, a heavy circling bird; a tank became Chetagahi, turtle, symbolizing slow, heavy armor, and a grenade was Nahaziadi, clapping sound. Even the largest U.S. ships had Navajo designations. A battleship was LOTSO, whale. These substitutions were unique, memorable, and, most importantly, completely meaningless to any Japanese interceptor listening in. To maximize security and operational flexibility, the code talkers ensured their cipher had several layers. The core was the 411-term substitution glossary. But to spell out names, map coordinates, or unfamiliar terms, they developed a phonetic alphabet. Each English letter was assigned not just one, but multiple Navajo words. For example, the letter O was represented by three distinct words, WOLLACHE, ant, AHJAD, leg, and clash DLNTH, apple. This triple redundancy was a stroke of genius. If a Japanese analyst happened to correctly decode the word for ant, the next letter in the sequence would be obscured because they would not know whether the subsequent Navajo word corresponded to the English T, L, or P. This dynamic confusion rendered any attempt at phonetic cracking completely futile. The sheer memorization required was immense. The entire code, the 411 terms, the complex alphabetical substitutions, and the operational protocols, was committed flawlessly to memory. The code talkers were strictly forbidden from writing down any part of the cipher. This served a dual purpose. First, it ensured that no code book could ever fall into enemy hands, eliminating the single greatest vulnerability of any traditional code. Second, it forced the code talkers to achieve an unprecedented level of mastery and speed. Their minds became the only reliable, mobile, and indestructible encryption devices in the U.S. military arsenal. The training focused relentlessly on speed under simulated combat conditions. Recruits were drilled using bulky, heavy field radios, transmitting and receiving complex messages while running, crawling, and operating under the intense noise of blank fire and mock explosions. The results were astounding. The contrast between the slow, laborious 30-minute process of the cipher machine and the instantaneous, 20-second transmission time of the Navajo code talkers was the difference between strategic failure and assured tactical success. The speed itself was a weapon, allowing commanders to make decisions in real time that paralyzed the enemy. By the end of 1942, the code talkers were ready for deployment. They carried with them not just a code, but the weight of their culture's future. The code talkers were initially deployed in small teams across the Pacific Theater, often in pairs, one to transmit, one to receive, working directly with battalion and division commanders. Their first real test came in the brutal fighting of Guadalcanal and subsequent island hopping campaigns. The Marines quickly learned to rely almost exclusively on the Navajo network for urgent, frontline communication, particularly for calling in artillery and coordinating air support. In the close-quarters jungle fighting, a delay of minutes could be fatal. The code talkers delivered precision in seconds. The immediate impact on Japanese intelligence was one of profound bewilderment. They continuously monitored the American radio bands, hoping to hear the characteristic clicks and rhythmic patterns of American ciphers. Instead, they heard a rapid, flowing, tonal language that defied all known linguistic analysis. Japanese analysts, despite their expertise in various Asian languages, could find no root, no analogy, and no pattern. They mistakenly concluded that the transmissions were a form of nonsense chatter designed to confuse, unable to grasp that this was the main operational channel of the U.S. Marine Corps. This intelligence failure was a strategic gift to the Allies, preventing the Japanese from ever anticipating the timing or location of American counterattacks. The code talkers' role intensified with the increasing ferocity of the battles. At Tarawa, where the Marines faced relentless defensive fire, the code talkers ensured that essential reinforcements and medical supplies were directed to the correct beachheads. Their work was one of unceasing, high-stakes mental endurance. They faced the trauma of combat while maintaining a level of linguistic precision that was literally life-saving. Any mispronunciation of a coordinate or a military term could result in American artillery fire landing on friendly troops. However, the most definitive test of the code talkers' service, and their most significant contribution, occurred during the horrific battle for Iwo Jima in early 1945. This was a 36-day campaign marked by suicidal Japanese defense and relentless American casualty rates. The terrain was volcanic and unforgiving, and the coordination of the immense armored and infantry forces was a logistical nightmare compounded by constant enemy fire. Major Howard Connor, the signal officer for the 5th Marine Division, bore witness to their performance. He reported that during the first 48 hours of the Iwo Jima landing, the most chaotic and critical period, the 6 code talker teams on the island transmitted and received over 800 messages. Every single one of these messages, detailing troop placement, artillery coordinates, and supply needs, was transmitted instantly and flawlessly. Connor's later, unequivocal statement became military legend: were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. Their unbroken code was the central nervous system that allowed the American command structure to function under maximum pressure. The personal cost was immense. The code talkers, constantly positioned near command posts, were high-value targets for enemy snipers. They fought with distinction, suffering wounds and enduring unimaginable psychological stress. Yet, tragically, they were also forced to deal with the constant threat of being mistaken for the enemy by their own fellow soldiers. Many code talkers were temporarily detained, and commanders were forced to assign special personnel whose sole job was to vouch for the code talker's identity, highlighting the painful hypocrisy they faced even while saving American lives. Following the Allied victory, the war ended, and the code talkers were simply discharged. They returned home without fanfare or public recognition. Their entire, heroic mission remained classified as a top-secret military asset. The U.S. military fully intended to reuse the code in any future conflicts, making it mandatory that the secret remain absolute. This enforced silence created a profound, generational burden. The code talkers were veterans of the fiercest fighting in the Pacific, yet they were legally bound to silence, unable to share their incredible accomplishments with their families, their children, or their communities. They had saved the nation, but they could not claim their honor. They returned to a reservation system and a country that largely refused to acknowledge their equality, denying them voting rights and economic opportunity. They were heroes forced into invisibility. The legacy of their silence endured for over 2 decades. Many code talkers suffered in isolation, unable to process their combat trauma openly. It was not until 1968 that the military finally declassified the Navajo Code. The news burst into the public consciousness, revealing a long-hidden chapter of American heroism that had been deliberately omitted from the history books. For the surviving code talkers, the declassification was a liberation, finally allowing them to speak of their service and claim their deserved place in history. The fight for official national acknowledgement was a slow, deliberate campaign led by the Navajo Nation and dedicated politicians. While President Ronald Reagan brought attention to their story in the 1980s, a highest honor was still decades away. Finally, in 2001, the nation issued its ultimate apology and tribute. President George W. Bush presented the Congressional Gold Medal to the original 29 code talkers and silver medals to their comrades. The ceremony was a powerful moment of national reckoning, acknowledging the immense debt owed to these men and correcting a profound historical injustice. The triumph of the Navajo code talkers is not just a military victory, it is a profound cultural triumph. Their unique, traditional language, once targeted for erasure by federal policy, proved to be the irreplaceable shield of democracy. Their success forever validated the inherent worth and strength of Native American culture. It fueled a new generation of activism, empowering the Navajo Nation to demand full political and cultural recognition. Their story proved beyond doubt that America's greatest strength lies in its diversity. The Navajo Code stands alone in military history as the only code never to be cracked by the enemy. It was secure not because of technology, but because of culture, intelligence, and the unwavering patriotism of the men who spoke it. The technical elegance of the code talkers system continues to be studied by modern cryptanalysts. Its success serves as a perennial reminder that true security can often be found outside the realm of computing and complexity. The human element, the memorization, the cultural knowledge, and the loyalty was the ultimate firewall. The code required zero encryption hardware, zero maintenance, and was impervious to any known method of electronic interception or decryption. This low-tech, high-security miracle remains a paradox of the Second World War. The names of the code talkers, men like Chester Nez, Joe Hosteen Kellwood, and Samuel Tom Holliday, are now etched into American history. Their stories are taught in schools and celebrated globally, serving as powerful symbols of resilience and commitment. They used their voices to save the world, and in doing so, ensured that the voice of the Navajo people would never again be silenced. Their legacy is a call to action, to recognize that true strength lies in embracing and protecting the diversity that makes America unique. The Navajo Code Talkers transformed a cultural treasure into a national security asset, delivering victory and forever changing the dialogue on race, service, and patriotism in the United States.